All righty.
All right.
So we're rolling.
All right. So if you've seen any of my videos recently, you may have noticed I am out west in Ansel Adams Wilderness Area, Sierra National Forest, and I'm here now. And this video really isn't about what's happened out here and what I've experienced, but something happened last night between this guy and myself. I'll introduce him in a minute. And it was just a really tough but wonderful experience, and we just kind of talked about how, like, man, that's a cool story to tell and share, and it'd be cool if more people could experience that same thing. And so so a quick intro in case you haven't seen any of the other stuff. So this is Tom Smith. He is the executive director of Summit Adventure, and if you'd seen any of my other stuff, you may have heard that I got a little bit of inheritance money from my mom, and she just encouraged me to do something kind of wild and crazy I wouldn't normally be able to afford. And right around the time I was thinking about climbing Mount Rainier, a buddy of mine who thought he wanted to do it decided not to do it. And that evening I got an email from Andrew Skirka talking about his expedition schedule. And it really got me thinking about that would be a cool way to spend the money. And then I kind of thought, well, if I'm out in the wilderness and I'm doing that kind of stuff, I'd really like there to be like a spiritual aspect to it. And so I just kind of thought, well, I bet there's a Christian company that takes people out in the backcountry, just like Jesus withdrew to the wilderness. And so I Googled that, and I came across a couple places, and kind of the two ones that I settled on was SRAM and Summit. And so I requested a catalog from SRAM, and I basically, Summit basically said we do custom adventures. So you kind of, choose your own adventure. And so I basically wrote Tom an email. Well, I didn't know it was you. I wrote Summit an email and kind of described, 35 years old, this weird retirement thing, and thinking that maybe God's calling us into missions and just this weird life transition. So maybe I'll let you pick it up. You got the email.
Yeah. I got the email from James, and it was a little bit unusual. It was a guy wanting to go explore what would be the next steps in life, and he wanted to do it in the context of the wilderness. So I thought that was fantastic, and we talked through a couple options of what that might be. He said, no, I don't really want to do this one. I don't want to do that one. Things like going to Ecuador, hiking the John Muir Trail, for whatever reason didn't pan out that way. But then came up with this idea about what if we traverse and sort of traipse through the Sierra National Forest in the Ansel Adams Wilderness on snow, over rock, and sort of camping out, backpacking, and that was the thing that we both agreed would maybe hit it. So it was a combination of physical challenge, some climbing, because he's really into climbing, new to climbing, excited about climbing, and wanted to use that as sort of the framework, I think, of this 5 days. However, the foundation, if you call it framework, is what the foundation. What happens after the foundation is a spiritual focus. So we knew that going into this, it wasn't just going to be how many things could we climb, how hard could we climb. It was going to be discussions about sharing what's going on in our life, difficulties, struggles, or whatever. And so all was set to go until I got a phone call, or a very strange phone call, from Parked National Parks. I'm not exactly sure if that's the right way to say it, but it's with Fox. The Fox channel, streaming channel, and it's called Parked. And so they go to national parks all over the country. And they said, hey, we're going to be in the Sequoia, Kings Canyon, Yosemite areas celebrating the 130th anniversary, I think, of Yosemite. I think that's the right number. But whatever it is, would you take us on a rappel? And I said, sure we could do that. And they said, well, the only days we could do it are these days. And it turns out that one of the two, either day, was going to be right in the middle of the 5-day thing that James and I had been talking about for about 7 months. And so they were willing to pay $500 for that. And so that was one thing. And then they were also going to have this show air as part of their regular, I think they're in their 8th season or something like that, of shows. So I don't know how many people watch those shows, but it seemed to me national TV and all that sort of stuff was just what Summit could use, because it's always difficult to get people to sort of see, understand, and think about going out in the wilderness, especially these days. So I proposed that to James, and he I think a good word is acquiesced. And you could add a couple other adjectives, things like, I don't think he was overly excited about it. In fact, I think he told me that.
Yeah.
So I maybe pushed him a little bit more than I should have, and being the sort of person that he is, he said, okay, I will essentially give up half a day, or even a little bit less than that. If a day is described as, I said essentially 8 to noon, but probably I can have the group all done, repelled at about 11 o'clock.
All right, so let me add a few details.
Yeah, so that was the framework from my end.
Yeah. Let me just add a few details. So we started talking in basically Thanksgiving last year, and it's what is it? End of June, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've been talking for like 7 months, and it was probably maybe 2 months ago that we like finalized this plan, and we agreed on the fee. So basically, it's like a 4-night, 5-day thing, one-on-one, and it cost me $4,000. And so we basically, like 8 weeks ago, I paid, and then this request to bring in Parked came like 3 days before I left, right? So it's just the timing for me had a bit of an impact. And so when he called and said, what about this Parked thing? I'm an extrovert. I like people. I'm not afraid of the camera. And so in many ways, I would have gone for it, but I've been, I kind of wanted some solitude and reflection. And so it was like, well, it really doesn't fit. So I kind of said, well, my gut tells me no. And then he had kind of a different proposal where we maybe split up, and that sort of proposal gave me the hint that maybe this was pretty important to him and good for Summit, and I didn't want to be a selfish bastard. And so I told him, I said, well, you know what, basically my gut says no, but I'll take it to the Lord in prayer, and give me a few hours. So I did that, and I mean, it was literally like 5 seconds into praying, this question just came right to my mind. And if you've watched some of my other videos about retiring and missionary work, you may know that the last couple of years, there's just been all these areas of my life where I felt the Lord was asking me, will you surrender this to me? And so the question that came to mind was, will you surrender the solitude that you're seeking for an opportunity to tell people about Christ? And I thought, well, maybe I'll be on national television. Maybe I'll get to mention something about, where I am with the Lord. And I just thought, yeah, I'll surrender my desire for solitude for that. So when I wrote you back and I basically said, let's do it. It really wasn't a decision of the mind or the logic or rationale. It's really like, okay, I feel pretty confident that the Lord said, go for it. So, yeah, so let's see, picking up. So I flew out, met Tom. We started hiking at 4 o'clock the first day. The next day we hiked up Couloir. We did some alpine mountaineering work. Mm-hmm. Went to the top of Moderna Peak. Moderna, right? It's Madeira.
Madeira Peak.
Yeah, sounds like Moderna to me. Then we slept at Lower Jackass Lake, and I got about 10 minutes of sleep because the mosquitoes were hellacious. And someone failed to mention that cowboy camping should include a type of mosquito netting or something like that. So anyway, it's been a bit of a joke between us. So then, so what is today? Tuesday? Monday? Tuesday.
Monday. No, Tuesday.
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Okay. So yesterday, Monday, was when we met this film crew, and so to basically get from where we were sleeping at Mosquito Lake to the car where we would meet them, we basically had to leave camp at 5 a.m. And so we got up early, hoofed it down there, and there was 6 of them, two producers, the star of the show, and 2 camera guys, 1 audio guy. And I mean, it felt like pretty serious production. Mm-hmm. And I was pretty melancholy. I wasn't my normal charismatic, jovial self. I was kind of melancholy. I'm kind of like taking in the scene, like, man, like this is really kind of not how I imagined my time in the wilderness, and just I don't know, kind of felt reserved and kind of seeing how things were going, and I could start to see how the film crew, like they had a lot of things they wanted to accomplish, camera angles and all this, and that was when I first started getting the feeling like this thing's gonna balloon in terms of time to a longer period of time. So maybe I'll throw back to you. We're in the parking lot. That scene is unfolding. So maybe I don't know if you want to say something about how you were feeling or thinking or forgetting the figure eights or whatever.
Yeah, I felt a lot of pressure because I knew that even though he had taken it to prayer and acquiesced, I still knew that if it was me, I would be maybe slightly offended, or maybe I just would have thought it was difficult to just say no, I don't want to do this. Like even with or without prayer, it was still going to seem a little bit selfish if I just said no, you can't do this. I mean, obviously, trying to have national TV and get a spotlight in that is, sort of a big deal to a small organization like ours. So yeah, and I noticed him being a little less effusive than he had been before. He was quieter, and of course, maybe a lot of us were quieter just because we didn't really know what was going on. So the camera crew takes over. Yeah. I remember thinking, as the sound guy took what seemed to me to be a half an hour to wire me up somehow. I don't know what the deal was going on, but he basically told me just to stand there. And so that was my first thought, that this isn't going to maybe go for 3 hours. And then we start hiking up the hill towards the rappel, and without that film crew there, James and I would have done the rappel anyway. So so there was a little tiny bit of me going, well, at least he gets to do the rappel with more people, and maybe the energy is better. And under normal circumstances, that probably would be true. Even though he was looking for solitude, he probably could have enjoyed an 8 to 11 as promised, with some other people that were trying to rappel. So I could see where that would have been right. And maybe there's a little bit of that for me of going, yeah, this isn't going to be that big a deal. I've never been part of a camera crew production for a national show, and so I had no idea what was going on. But it only took a few minutes to figure out that this is going to be a little bit longer than 8 to 11. Partly because on our hike up, after I was trying to get mic'd up or whatever it was for the first half hour, then they were literally following this, the host of the show, her name is Abby, and me, asking us to keep talking up the hill, and then they would stop every 5 minutes and redo everything. And so even the short quarter-mile hike up a hill to just get this thing started, that was taking another half hour. So I finally had to say, look, we've got to get this thing moving. And at that point, I felt a lot of pressure, and that things just were not going to go well. And there was a definite sense of, both for me, of feelings of guilt and regret that I had entered into this scenario.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Yeah, so by the time, so right here, this is the area called the balls, right? Mm-hmm. So over here you can see what's called the toad. Over here, that precipice or whatever, that's called the prow. So we were gonna rappel off of that. So basically from the car to here, quarter mile, something like that. And I mean, honestly, it's fairly strenuous. They had camera gear, we had ropes, all kinds of stuff. It was hot, like really slippery. So by the time we got here, I mean, I looked at my watch, and it was so clear that this thing was just going to be, maybe not twice the estimated time, but a good bit. And I was already starting to kind of get moody, and now they had mic'd me up too. And by the time I got my first scene of, the guy carrying the rope or something, I'd lost most of my charisma, and I kind of knew, like, with this level of charisma, they're probably not going to give me too many speaking parts because, I'm just the grump. And so then I was kind of feeling guilty, like, well, James, like, you did this with the thought that maybe, you would share what Christ has done in your life with people. And now you've almost disqualified yourself for that. Like, they're not going to give you the mic. And so I was wrestling with that. And there's a part of me that was, mad at Tom for kind of pushing me into this. But then I could also see that, you were suffering to some extent. And so it was like, yeah, he's the perp, but he's the victim, and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, so basically, you and I, we climbed up to the prow, we set up the fixed lines, and they figured out how many camera angles they'd want to get and all that kind of stuff. And I'm trying to think. I mean, the rest of it is basically I rappelled and they rappelled, and it was all really charismatic. Everyone was super excited, and when the camera's off, it's kind of melancholy, and then the camera goes on, everyone turns on the charm and all that, and that's fine. But I just kind of stood there, and I was just like, man, I can't believe like this is where I find myself. And I think what concerned me most was really that you and I had 2 more days together, mm-hmm. and I wasn't sure that you and I were going to see the whole thing with the same set of eyes. And so I just thought, well, I don't want to be stuck in the wilderness one-on-one with a guy I'm pissed at, or who's pissed at me. And so I told you this later, I mean, in the worst of it, I mean, I was pretty much ready to say, hey, Tom, I'm just going to hike back to the car, like, see you later, and basically say goodbye to, whatever I had paid for the remaining time. And I just didn't want to be stuck in the wilderness a bad relationship. And basically, I mean, I met Tom for the first time 3 days ago, and I mean, we've basically made fun of each other and had a great conversations and super deep talks ever since. So it's been great, but yeah, it felt pretty awful. So anyway, so they departed, and I think they left around 2. So it was
maybe even later, maybe
Yeah.
2:30ish.
So it was something like 2.5, 3 hours past what we kind of had agreed. But then also, what I pointed out later is basically their involvement dictated our day starting at about 5 a.m. So even though we weren't with them at 5 a.m., we were up and hiking because of them. And so, yeah, so basically, Tom and I, we hiked back to the top of the Prow to clean the anchors and pull the ropes and all that. And basically, I think you said, so how you feeling? Or something like that. How you doing? And I kind of didn't want to tell him how I was feeling until I had a sense of whether or not he thought my feelings would be justified. Because, and I told him this. I basically said, like, I didn't want to start saying I'm disappointed if he thought being disappointed was unthinkable. Because then, then we're kind of at a standstill and we got to spend 2 more days together. So I think I said something like, well, let's see how good your discernment skills are. How do you think I'm feeling? Or another way, how would you feel if I was in your shoes?
Yeah.
So then maybe you say a
So
little bit about.
So he turns it on me, and I said, well, I'd be feeling things like disappointment, discouragement. I said, frankly, I'd be angry. So that was maybe the spark that he needed to just share that. Another word that came up was resentful.
Yep.
But I could still tell that he was almost simmering, is what it sort of felt like a little bit to me, like it just was really awful. And at some point he told me that he was considering heading down and basically kiboshing 7 months of planning, a fair chunk of money that he put into this whole thing, and I guess he would just think about leaving, and that would be the end of it. And I was astonished it was that powerful for him, but not, maybe astonished isn't the right word. Maybe I was just surprised it was that powerful. But the more we talked about it, the more I realized it was extremely unfair. And the thing that I most thought about was where is justice in this thing? Where is justice served for a person who spent $4,000 plus, I don't know, I think it was a couple $1,000 more plane fares and trying to get this whole thing together. And it's a major undertaking, whereas I'm sitting out here waiting, and I received him, right? And so even though the prep for the trip for me was substantial, it wasn't anything like what he put together. And then a couple days before, I spring this on him with a little bit of like, oh well, I could easily have seen where when I say here's plan A, and he doesn't really want to do that, and then I spring plan B on him, and without thinking that if I spring plan B on him, then that makes it seem even more so like I really want this. Yeah. And so that was for me a little bit of the where's the justice in all that, and if that isn't just, then how do we find justice? So that was sort of my mindset of going, yeah, I could say I'm sorry, and I did say I was sorry.
Sure.
And that I think I could tell that helped him. He seemed like he sort of propped up a little bit more.
Totally.
In fact, I think he propped up enough so that we had fun in the rain, because it started raining.
Yep.
And we enjoyed that. And then he was even willing to say, hey, I'm going to get on rope on the first part of the rappel because my shoes are slick and the rock is slick. And so I thought, okay, great, this is good. We're maybe even almost back to normal.
Yeah.
And then we came back down to camp, and then part 2 of this was where it really got big.
And before we get into part 2, so I mean, I think it was a good summary. So I feel quite a bit better when I talk things out, and we probably talked on the Prow for 15 minutes before the rain came, and I would say what we had come to the conclusion of is basically the way I was feeling was reasonable, and pretty similar to the way that you would feel if you'd been in my shoes.
Yeah, for sure.
And we talked a little bit about how we kind of were both victims of something we hadn't fully understood, and then the rain came, and that kind of broke up the conversation to some extent. But I would say, yeah, I mean, we were pretty much back to normal. So yeah, then we came back here, had lunch, coffee, talked about a bunch of totally other things, good serious stuff, which is what we've been doing the whole time, and then ran down and grabbed some stuff out of the car, and And so in between part A and part B was probably 4 or 5 hours. And during that time, one of the things that I thought of is, what I really want is my time back. I want this whole day back so that it would have been different. But Tom can't give me that, right? It's just a no-brainer. But there is something Tom could give me, right? And that's like a partial refund because, he didn't bring me out here as a friend. I'm a client. You're a service provider. And we're becoming friends, and that's great. But and so one of the things I thought of was like, well, I did my part up front, right? I gave him exactly every penny of $4,000 up front, and I kind of took a risk because we could have gotten out here and hated each other, or you may have not been able to keep up with me or whatever, and so I kind of felt like I took the risk. And I didn't know that Tom had gotten paid, but at the very end there was a comment about gratuity, and so that was kind of the tip for me. Okay, like he's been paid, plus Summit got some publicity for this. And so I really kind of felt like, sort of I had paid the price for what you'd received, and I felt a little bit cheated. And so to me, I thought, well, if I were Tom, the right thing would be to do is to offer some sort of a partial refund. But I had decided I was going to ask for it myself. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, we're talking about a first world problem here. I received inheritance money to come out on this incredible adventure, and boo-hoo, I got to do 5 or 6 amazing things, and half a day didn't go the way I like, and wah. And so I just couldn't bring myself to say, okay, Tom, you need to make this right this way. And so I just said, I'm not going to ask. I think it would be right for him to offer, and if he offers, I'm going to accept. Anyway, so get back up here. I think it was nightfall. We weren't looking deep into each other's eyes anymore.
Yeah.
And then you brought up you kind of brought the financial piece to it, and you kind of brought the topic of justice. What does justice look like? Because you kind of recognized how there was a certain type of injustice. And then you made an offer. So I don't know if you want to add anything before we get to the numbers, let's say, but yeah, why don't you pick back up?
Yeah, just it seemed to me fair, completely fair to say you lost something that you paid for, and despite the fact that our relationship was really positive and growing, and seemed like it was just going in a very good direction, there's still this contract, and I get that clearly. I mean, I was still the guide. I still got paid. And it seemed like I wasn't, whether it was me, my fault, or just circumstances, or the whole 9 yards. His side of the contract was not being honored. So something has to happen. At least that's in my mind. Something's got to happen more than just I'm sorry. And oftentimes I think the way of it's not, I don't know if it's the way of the world, but one of the ways of the world is you gotta pay for things with cash. You gotta make things happen that involve some sort of financial sacrifice or remuneration or whatever the deal is. So I said, yeah. So I think it's appropriate to have a refund, and that seemed to strike with him. He was still, I think it struck me as he was a little bit reluctant, even though I offered the refund. It wasn't like he said, oh yeah, for sure, that's what I've been thinking of. I mean, it turned out that he had been thinking of that, but he was still, I think, a little bit reluctant to say that, probably because of propriety or whatever. But
well, and it feels a little greedy to say, I'm a little pissy, but you can pay me off, and because it I mean, I don't know, all that kind of stuff just feels a little greedy to me. And so I felt a little bit weird saying, yeah, Tom, money would fix this. But maybe, as we'll talk about in a little bit, it's really not quite about the dollars and cents. It's about something else that we'll get to. So go ahead.
Well, I was so jazzed and glad that it did seem like money would fix this, not because of the financial part, not because of the actual dollar amount, but because there was an actual sacrifice made to say, yeah, I really want to fix this. So at least that's how I interpreted it.
Totally.
So then the big deal was, okay, well, how much would it take? $15, 50 cents? What would that be? And so the most obvious thing that came to me right away is Parked paid us $500 to do the gig. Well, so we'll refund you $500. That you lost half a chunk of the day, or at least all the way till from maybe 5, 6 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon at least. and then there's the rest of the day. So I thought, well, $500 seems relatively fair to me. But I said, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So and I'd also been thinking of this possible situation in question, and you know, we talked about this already, right? So it was a 4 night adventure we're on, and so it's a 5 day thing. But the first day started at, you know, I think we started hiking at 4. And to me, hiking and backpacking, it's almost like the drive out to the national forest. It wasn't necessarily like what I was pumped about. It was other activities. So I kind of said, well, I was like, so I kind of thought, well, I basically paid $4 grand for 4 full days, and so basically one day was ruined. So I was thinking all this. I didn't say it, but you know, so I'd like $1 grand back. But then, truth be told, I mean, once they left and once we talked, the rest of the day was great. I mean, we had fun on the Prow, we had great conversations, and so I realized it's really not quite accurate to say a whole day was ruined, because after 2:30 it was pretty great. So I felt like that wasn't the right angle to come at, and I wasn't looking for an angle to get as much out of him as I could. I think we both legitimately were trying to say, like, what is fair, what is right, you know, even, you know, so then something else kind of came to me, and I said, well, you know, Tom, during the hours of sort of 5 to 2:30 today, you kind of triple dipped, basically, where you got paid by me, and you got paid by them, and Summit got some publicity. And who knows what that publicity is worth? You know, maybe no one watches that show, I don't know, or maybe everyone does, and it's, you know, worth who knows. But I said, so if you give me the 500 that you were given, then you go from sort of triple dipping to just double dipping. But that still doesn't seem right to me, you know? And I mean, to your credit, and to some extent to my amazement, like, I mean, you seemed like you were right there with me. Like, I think neither of us were really talking about how much money can I get in the account. It was really like this analysis of, like, you know, what's the right way to look at this thing? So as soon as I kind of accused you of triple dipping, you saw it and you're like, oh yeah, okay, that's fair. And then you said, all right, 750. And I thought it was a great compromise. And so basically, since last night, that conversation, we've been constantly joking with one another about $250 in a variety of contexts.
Of 250, yeah.
But what was really interesting too is that you know, we were already sort of reconciled and the mood was good, but I feel like both of us had like this really deep sense of, like, those kind of conversations don't really happen that much. I mean, to be sort of really pissed at each other, or at least me to you, and you know, 20 minutes later be good again, and then 5 hours later, you know, sort of be, you know, pulling money from each other's pockets, and then both of us just like really excited about the whole experience. And so we just talked about how, you know, I live in Chattanooga in the South, you know, they're not real direct. Before that I lived in Germany and Michigan, where they are a bit more, and you know, Tom is a super direct guy. Like, you know exactly where, you know, I know exactly where I stand with you, because you've basically made fun of me as much as you've complimented me. So it's like, I see the division, and I've been the same way back. And it was just like so refreshing to say, like, man, like, we actually went through a pretty nasty scenario today. You know, I could have gone back home and left Summit a bad review and told all my friends, you know, money ill spent and screw Tom Smith, you know, and you could have called me this, you know, wussy client who had to have everything his own way, silver spoon. But like, in such a short period of time, you know, not only were we reconciled, but we were actually like sort of strengthened, because we'd been through some crap together and we both had handled it like men. And so, yeah, we just were kind of talking about, like, man, what a great story. And, you know, like, I wish more people in the world knew that this type of stuff was possible and it was worth risking, and maybe had an idea of kind of how to do it. And I think both of us believed one another in the statement that the negotiation wasn't about the dollars and cents. It was something deeper than that. And yeah, and so today we had a great day. We climbed and rappelled off that thing, and then about, I don't know, maybe 4 hours ago, I was telling Tom about my YouTube channel and stuff like that, and he said, you know, hey, you know, what would it be like to make a video explaining, you know, kind of what happened and sharing it on YouTube? And I mean, the 30 minutes after he said that might have been like the most high moments I've had out here. It's just like, man, that is so refreshing and exciting to me, to use this YouTube channel, which sometimes is about fixing chainsaws or a new carabiner, to something much more meaningful and much more useful, you know, to the common man. And so I guess kind of what we're both hoping is for anyone who's watched all of this so far, to just recognize that oftentimes in life it's worth having a tough talk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's worth taking some risks and saying, I'd like $250 more, but take me at my word. It's not about the dollars. It's about a type of justice mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that at least I've seen in my life, relationships are always stronger when you've actually had a conflict and resolved it, because now you're not living in this make-believe world of, I have a friend and we never fight. It's like, well, I have a friend and we fight, but I also see that he's a man about it when we fight. He doesn't cheat and so yeah, anyway, that's what this video is about. And so I think we'll probably title it something like, conflict resolution in the backcountry, or I don't know, something like that. But I don't know, do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, it sort of occurred to me just thinking about how most people approach conflict or differences is with what Stephen Covey used to call like a win-lose thing. And so you've like, I've got to give up something and in order for this thing to happen. And so as James was just talking, I was thinking it was actually sort of a win-win, because both of us got a win on it. We didn't have to give up something and just go, well, I guess I'll just have to live with that. What I got out of the deal was a whole new side of James that shared, and I just sort of watched him blossom in this negotiation, and that was super important for me, because just getting out of it with here, I'll give you a little bit of money, even if the first 500, and thinking he was only partially satisfied, that wouldn't have been a win. That would have been sort of something in between. And then I think for him to get this 750 after realizing, okay, maybe I don't want a full 1,000 because of the rest of the day. It was just like a lot of thinking that said, I don't just need to get my way. I'm shutting down. If I don't get it exactly like this, it's just not going to work for me. That I think that's just unusual for people, and maybe it's unusual for him and I. And so maybe it was a miraculous, a divine intervention, a divine moment. Sometimes it's hard to figure out, is the Holy Spirit really moving and active, and then you have something that's this powerful, and you're like, well, that certainly could have been the Holy Spirit. At least that's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful for it. I think getting a win-win encourages me to keep moving on that more, because it is possible. It just takes people who are sort of willing to go, I just don't have to have exactly my way or the way I thought 10 minutes ago. We're gonna talk, we're gonna dialogue, we're gonna try to meet. And I think for me, one of the starting points was that James wanted to know if I was gonna listen to him. And I think the work that I do out here at Summit Adventure, one of the overwhelming things is that people want to be listened to. They want to be heard. They don't always care that much about getting what they want, but if they don't get heard, then everything changes. So those were important points for me.
Yeah, and as you were talking, something else just dawned on me. So we've been doing devotions together in the morning, alternating, and the devotion he did a couple days ago was about the members of the body of Christ, and we talked about sort of which member do we think we are, maybe in this season of life, and he made the joke about something that was actually true for me. And I identified as the liver, maybe more on that in some other video. But you identified as the ear.
Yeah.
And you said, I'm in a role right now, I'm in a season of life where, I need to be a listener. And I didn't think of that till just now.
Yeah.
But the other thing that was cool, and I didn't think of this till just now either, is so yesterday, after all the bad stuff happened, and we had, like, let's say part A reconciliation, but before this negotiation of the money, we're talking about something totally different. And I shared with him sort of this interesting little couple of words packed into a super well-known Bible passage, 1 Corinthians 13, talking about love. And packed into love is patient, love is kind. It says, love does not insist on getting its own way. And we talked about that in a totally different context, but I think in some ways, that's what we kind of both did, is it's kind of like, well, here's the way I'd like for it to go, but I won't insist on that. And we kind of went back and forth. And so that was, I don't know, it's just kind of dawning on me now that, we just talked about that, and then we more or less both accidentally, at least in relationship to talking about it, put it into practice.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty cool.
Exciting. Very exciting.
All right, well, I think that's it. So hope that was interesting to someone. I think we're 35 minutes in now, so I don't know if you've made it, but if you had and that was encouraging or helpful, then praise God for that. And if you're still here and you didn't like it, I don't know why you stuck it out, but give it a thumbs down so that I know not to waste 35 minutes like this again with Tom, because I'm paying you by the hour a lot. So anyway, have a great day. God bless, and talk to you later.
See ya.